Welcome to NEKVT Rocks, and my guest today is Wayne Hankin. Wayne, you're a musician, a musicologist, an inventor, and what else?
Well, I think that's enough. I mean, any one of those things would be a life profession in itself.
Right.
I've had probably about 3 lives so far. I started...
You've got 6 more to go.
Oh, yeah.
Or is that only cats?
No. I'm very catty. I say that now because I'm 66. I could pretty much stop right now. I don't have any reason to fill a resume. I mean, it's there's more credits there than I ever could use. A brief history of me. I was born in Baltimore. I was educated in music in the New England area. I went to Hart College of Music. That's what it was called then back in the 70s, and then completed my graduate studies at New England Conservatory. And from there, I went to Europe immediately. And I played mostly in early music groups. I was in theater. I did a lot of radio. I was mistaken for a jazz musician because I was American, because every
American must be a jazz musician, right?
Right, they just think it's in our blood. So
Wow.
I actually ended up working in radio as a professional jazz musician with no skills whatsoever in that background. Although I had studies with certain jazz people before that. Jackie McLean was the main person that I had worked with. He had worked many years with Charlie Parker. So he was an icon at our school, and he encouraged me to go more world. But that wasn't my focus. Early music, that's what I wanted to do. But what paid the bills was doing radio and television in Berlin, West Berlin at that time. And so in my jazz world, I ended up playing with people like Lionel Hampton because there would always be these visiting artists that would come in, and we had a house band. This was back when radio studios, were these several-story buildings.
Right. I remember that.
Which had, 30 or 40 studios sometimes, and there were usually 3 orchestras. There was one main orchestra, like the Radio Symphony Berlin. There was a jazz orchestra, there was a wind orchestra. I mean, everything was very much self-contained, and then tons of commercial stuff going on. So because I played so many different instruments, my background was early pre-classical winds. Because of that, what happened is there was a rivalry between Berlin and London as to who had the more unusual musician. So I would come in every week with a different instrument, and they would send that to London. They would say, "Take that, what do you've got?" And then they would have their musician play. So
our countries are so mature. But better to fight with instruments than other weapons.
Well, I'll tell you, it was a very, very friendly rivalry.
Yeah.
And so it kept me employed for quite a while. So, I mean, it was very easy to be a musician at that time. All you do is show up.
So how did you get to Newport?
Okay, well, the quick story was I left Berlin in 1986. I did 6 years. I wanted to go home. I wanted to make my career in New York.
Sure.
And so for the next 15 years, I worked in New York and built up my credentials there as a composer, as a performer, and a conductor. I was in residence at the Metropolitan Museum of Art with New York's Ensemble for Early Music, which is now known today as Early Music New York, an ensemble I still play with after these 30 years. And everything was going pretty much fine. There always were good times, bad times.
Sure.
It's feast or famine when you're a freelance musician.
Right.
And then the late 90s, things were getting a little raw. I decided I wanted to buy a house in City Island, which is kind of the most un-New York-like area in the Bronx. And in doing so, I was going to write an opera for Glimmer Glass Opera. I had a good agent. I just finished making my debut at Lincoln Center, so I thought things were going up, but I had to take a risk. Unfortunately, during 2001, 9/11 hit, and everything stopped. And so I was in trouble because I had this house and I had to pay for it. And, if I couldn't do that, I was going to basically run dry financially. Right. So I packed up from New York and I ended up at Cirque du Soleil for 6 years. And I did 9 productions over a 10-year period with them. And so that enabled me, because I was able to reunite with my lovely girlfriend, who I'm still with after all these years, back in 2001, We reunited in 2002, so it's been 20 years since then, and she lived in Montreal, and so I had to have a house close by, hence Newport.
Right.
Because I found upper New York State too creepy,
Mm-hmm.
and upper New Hampshire kind of too rural and too far.
Yeah.
So this
So
was,
Vermont was just right, like Goldilocks.
well, the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah.
That was what made it so incredible for me, this beautiful area that was so unoccupied, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a house so badly because I was, I needed something to fill up all my junk.
Right.
So I've been very happy in that house. I've been here since 2006. And it's a wonderful town because nothing happens here. And that's an asset because you don't have distractions. If you live in Manhattan, you'll never get any work done because there's always
So
something
much,
happening all
right.
the time. And I always go back to New York and Los Angeles still. I mean, I still work at these places. So usually when that happens, I don't really have any other time to myself because
Right.
of all the distractions. Here I can sit down, I can work, I can compose, I can arrange. And this is where Jubo was born.
So tell us about Jubo.
Well, let's look at ourselves. I had already had a career, and I already thought to myself, gee, what more is there to do? I saw the classical audience shrinking, and I saw less and less people playing. I started to look into it. And at the time in Los Angeles, I was working for the most successful ocarina company in the United States, which was Songbird Ocarina. And I decided to do research for them. And so I worked there for a few months, and I said, you know what your problem is? You're on a trend right now, which is The Legend of Zelda. And you've got your audience there, and that's what's made you successful, but it's not sustainable.
Right.
You have to go into other areas, and so I thought education. Well, Darren Songbird, who is the person, or Darren Steinberg, who is the person who created that wonderful company, saw that, but we realized there was a stylistic difference of opinion. In other words, he had a very cool image, and he didn't want that.
He wanted to stay cool.
Right, he didn't want that
Yeah.
school kid sort of thing that
Right.
makes it uncool, especially with what's happened with the recorder. It's a shame what happened here. And I could see the problem. So I, wrote all about this in this book. And eventually I thought to myself, I have to create this. So I needed some heroes. The hero that I thought was the one I wanted to model after was George Eastman, who created Kodak. And what his thing was, he took a very cumbersome and difficult profession like photography and made it simple so that even a child could do it.
Right.
The motto was, let the kids Kodak.
We all had brownies.
That's right.
We
did. That was,
My father worked for Ilford, the rival company.
oh really?
Yeah.
Well, then you know all about what the brownie was all
Yes,
about.
I do.
It was a simplified Kodak.
Yes.
So that kids could take pictures.
And we did.
Yeah. Because before that, I mean, cameras were the size of a safe.
Yes.
And they weighed as much. You had to have all the equipment. You had to know how to develop. The motto at Kodak was, you push the button, we do the rest.
Right.
And so
the
you-
whole drama of taking a photo before was awful.
Oh, terrible. I mean, and you had to be very dedicated, and it was hazardous, and there was very little chance of success if you didn't know what you were doing.
It was World War III in our household because my father would want to take a photograph. He decided for whatever bizarre reason. And we were all expected to be ready and to stand appropriately. So he would produce his camera, and kids and critters would all fly in different directions. None of us could ever be found. It was so miserable.
So just coordinating that was difficult.
Yeah, and then the pose, and it wasn't always the right take the first time, and you're still standing there, and you've got this smile plastered on your face. It was miserable.
Well, if you look at those 19th century photographs,
That's
they're all
why
like
they look
this.
like that.
Well, because they all had to hold still.
I know. I remember them.
Yeah.
They weren't even just 19th century. That was well into the 20th.
So what did Eastman do? He took all those chemicals that were put on glass, and he put it on what we call a dry plate. That was the first stage.
Yeah.
Then he converted that chemical into roll film, celluloid. And then all of a sudden you could take hundreds of pictures.
And then pay a lot of money to get them developed. But
Yeah, but there was a thrill. People would spend their
I know.
evenings looking at the photographs.
and sticking them in albums with those little corner things.
Yes,
to
I
put
love the
them
little
on.
corner things. And so that was an event. And if you look 100 years ago, what we were as a musical nation, which is what we're not really right now,
Right.
40% of our population played. Today, that's less than 10. In
a
other words,
shame.
more people 100 years ago played music than are people in our country today, even
Right.
though it was 70 million 100 years ago. Now it's over 330 million. We only have about 27 million people
Wow.
who play actively. How do I define actively? Well, it's maybe going to church rehearsal once a week or getting together with your friends playing on the
Well,
weekend.
jamming, yeah,
Yeah,
just having fun.
yeah. But it gets rarer and rarer. When I go out and talk to people when I'm selling this, the first thing I say is people simply don't have time to sit down and learn an instrument. And they all nod their heads and they say,
true.
and they start talking. And what I wanted to do is create something that took a fraction of the time to learn, because unfortunately with instruments, especially electronics, they keep adding features, making them more complicated, more
Right.
heavy, and unfortunately more daunting, which takes more time to learn. Look at a computer program. I mean, the one I use is a simple text edit thing when I just want to get my work done.
Right.
I don't need to have every gun, bell, and whistle. So this is what this is all about. It's essentially an instrument that's stripped down to nothing. So you only have 4 holes instead of 9. You don't have cross fingerings. You don't have half holings. There's no electronics in it. It's indestructible.
And it's cool colors.
Oh yeah, and I only brought a couple examples, but the whole thing is that you can take it hiking with you, and yes, it will fit in the overhead compartment. And wanted to make them attractive enough so
Right.
that people would want to wear them. I'm not wearing mine today, but the most important thing is when they ask, how's it sound?
Yeah.
And so, for example, if I may.
Sounds great.
Yeah, thank you. A child can learn that in less than a week on an instrument like this.
Right.
Whereas I'm sorry to say with a recorder, they'll probably never learn it. Because if they play it in the key of F, their first note is already doomed. They have to do a cross-fingering F. And B flat is another cross-fingering. So most kids, when they learn recorder, only end up playing in the key of G major because they usually
Right.
can only play with one hand. The right hand presents dilemmas. I've certainly talked to many, many companies, and I've consulted for quite a few of them. And they're resigned to teaching the instrument in an inappropriate way that spells failure for all the kids. Matter of fact, I worked this out. I have 35 years of research that I've done on my own. 44 to 48% of children in the United States will fail recorder the moment the instrument is put in their hands.
Right.
And what's the other reason for it? Usually what happens is people have preconceived metaphors about how an instrument should be played. So they start doing this, or there you go. I mean, what you're doing when you're teaching is the race against bad habits setting in. I would think of this. If you have an orchid, what's your temptation? You don't know anything about gardening, you're going to water it, right?
Of course. Drown
Right.
it.
That's right. All you need is 3 ice cubes once a week, and that takes care of it. But most people will think, oh, plant, got to water it, and so just like what you said,
Yeah.
drowns. So, again, I already had a career. I had nothing to prove beyond that. I still play for film, television, video games, radios, libraries, the whole thing. So that part of my career is still very much intact, even being up here, because usually if I'm looking for excitement, I'm not exactly here. I'm here to chill down. I'm here to play a little golf,
Right.
ride my bike on the trail, and work and create. And so to me, Newport is a paradise in that way. However, when you see what's become of Newport? As we know, we just finished seeing this chapter end of what happened, which was essentially a hole in the ground downtown.
Right.
I see so many solutions for how this town could, be better. I don't want to see it end up being tattoo parlors, Burger King,
I know.
and liquor stores, which is, if nothing's done, that's what it will eventually end up, because with empty storefronts, somebody's going to move in like that.
Right.
And we see revolving doors of people try to make a go at a business, and what usually happens?
They fail.
They fail. So what the town really needs, and I look at this in the way of what I saw in Los Angeles, because when I worked at Cirque and we did Los Angeles, they booked us downtown, which nobody wanted to be in at that time, because it was such to them, a dreadful place. There was nothing to do downtown. It's just people would work and then they would go home, which is the opposite now. And what did they do? They decided you resurrect the whole block. You don't put one new improvement here, one new
Right.
improvement, because it won't work. And especially when I sell, the key to success for all the vendors is to have the variety. That's what brings people in. So it can't be just one little thing. So whenever the town really wants to discuss this, rather than spending a lot of money just figuring out what they already know, the town has to be reinvented. And if it's reinvented correctly, I would like to see it become an educational center, which is what this is. So what I
That
do
would be
usually,
great.
I already have for this the programs.
Right.
Jubo 1, Jubo 2. These are the stages of learning. Matter of fact, Amazing Grace I just played, you learn in Jubo 1. The average person, as I said, can learn that within 2 weeks. You can learn faster on an instrument like this than you could on any other instrument. And so once that's done, the next stage is, okay, what do you do for an encore? And so what I do, and what will be probably its forever project, is to create the repertory to build it so it doesn't turn into a dead end like so many instruments I played. I play instruments like pipe and tabor, for example. It's a wonderful instrument, but has no repertory.
Right.
So I'd teach these classes, everybody would be excited, and then there was no music for them to play. So that's why there's Jubo Rep, so that they have somewhere to go. So if it's, let's say, name a genre.
Folk.
Okay, let's say, pick a country, like pick a Eastern European country.
Bulgaria.
All right. You get the idea.
Right.
Regular folk, okay? Pick another genre.
Political folk.
Okay, how about this?
Perfect.
So although it's limited in its octave,
It can go places.
it can play hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces. So why do you need everything? Why not just start with something that's simple, and then let's say you find the limits, like, I want to play the Star Spangled Banner. You can't do that on this. The octave's too great.
Right.
The range is too great.
People can't sing it either for the same reason.
Right. I mean, what was it?
Ridiculous.
It was a tavern song. And it was a
Yes.
tavern song to show off the singer.
And they should have left it as that. It's not a useful.
Well, it just
anthem.
happened to be a happy accident that
I
it
know.
was popular during the time of the War of 1812. Obviously, what do you think would be a better American anthem?
Something that isn't glorifying war, for a start.
All right.
And something that is more singable, that encourages participation.
All right. I mean, there are a couple of candidates. Some people like America, America, Oh Beautiful for
Yeah,
Spacious
that's okay.
Skies. God Bless America. Although
Power,
now,
Power and the Glory. That should freak people out.
I don't know Power
Oh,
and the Glory.
it's a Phil Oakes song. You should look it up sometime. It's
All right,
pretty
sure.
amazing.
Yeah. Maybe somebody can write one. Well, the other
Oh,
thing
right
is
one, yeah.
we do composing. So, it's to get children and to get anybody who wants to start music to read music on the first day, to compose within the
Right.
first week. So, for example, if I wanted to compose a great American song, let's say I had, what do I love about this country? Then then you build upon it. Something in this land that I love. And you just keep building it
Right.
up. You only really need an octave. I mean, I must say I'm quite happy with the repertory that I play because for older people, for example, I can play things that they identify with, like, you know. For younger people, they want to hear what they see in the films or what they do. So, for example, Star Wars Bar. Because it can play in 9 keys, even though it looks very simple. Don't let the looks fool you. It can do quite a lot.
Can do a lot more than it appears, right?
Yeah. So, and then there's the middle ground. There are all these other people. You know, my generation, for example, they want to hear things like this, like. Or. You can get anything you want at Alice's. I mean, it can touch all ages. And so what's surprising about this, it's an instrument that seems to have no age limits, where a recorder gets stuck in 8-year-old land. I've taught kids as young as 3 and as old as 87, the bigger kids. And so last week I had a sweet little girl with her parents. Her name was Ash, short for Ashley. And she learned her scale in 2 minutes. She came back an hour later with her parents and said, "Look at me," and she went like this. And, you know, she was obviously distracted by all the other things at the fair, but found a few minutes of her time to learn Happy Birthday, which
That is so great.
Yeah, so
your goal is to make this available to all ages, as a way of facilitating people bringing music back into their lives, performance music,
right.
participation.
Just imagine if we really could make music more a part of our lives rather than just listening to it on the phones, which is passive.
And being told how to listen to it now. You can't even, our cars don't play CDs anymore, so you can't choose your own. You have to pick what Spotify tells you to have.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's awful.
Really?
Makes me crazy.
Well, you know, these technologies come and they go, and sometimes they get revived, but I'll tell you, for the most part, all the labor-saving devices which eventually put us out of the picture usually render themselves obsolete in a very short amount of time. If you look at the innovations, the player piano, which everybody had a piano in their home if you were respectable middle class. You still do.
I'm not respectable, but I still have one.
Oh, I think you are. Now, when's the last time you opened up your piano bench?
Oh, a long time ago.
What's in that piano bench?
Music, actually.
Spanning?
Most of it's folk related, but it's spanning a long time.
Yeah, I mean, how many decades do you think it covers historically?
At least 4.
4 decades, 40 years of music sitting in that piano bench.
Yes.
That's what people did 100 years ago. The leading product that sold in music was sheet music. It wasn't streaming. And so when you went to a department store, usually like a Woolworths or something, the first bin you saw was a whole bin of sheet music entries. Stores used to have music departments. I'm just regular department stores where you had a guy at a piano, a song plugger, and you would bring over your sheet music and say, "How's this one go?" And they would go like, "Bum, bum, 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 bum." Okay, I'll buy that one. Most people played. At least one member of the family played piano. Or why would you have an expensive piece of furniture like that in your home?
Just to sit there, right?
Yeah. It resembled respectability. If you had a piano in your house, that said you were established, you weren't nomadic, and that meant you were a bedrock in the community, because piano was a very permanent piece of furniture. So if it was there, you were staying there. And so we see relics of that. When my mom passed away, we had to do away with her piano because nobody wanted them.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful old Weber. It didn't play very well, but it was a beautiful piece of furniture. When the moving men came, I accidentally walked downstairs to my car and saw what they had done to it, which had turned it into sticks of kindling. It broke my heart because it was like watching a member of your family die.
Yeah. The town of Hanover, you know what Hanover is?
Yeah, sure.
Has pianos on the street in the summer old pianos that people have gifted to them. They've painted them bright colors, which some may be appalled by, but people sit and play.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, there's something lovely about the touch of a piano
Yeah.
that I don't find in electronic instruments. You notice they don't use electronics out there.
Right.
So what do you think represents, why do you think it's so appealing for people to see them and to sit down and attempt to play them?
It's creative, and it's very inviting.
Mm-hmm.
And in your head, you know other people who can play, and you're visualizing those people, and you think, I could do that. Well, yeah, maybe someday. But you can certainly have fun sitting there,
Yeah.
just plinking something out.
Yeah. I mean, none of these devices, whether they're electronic or manual pianos, can survive weather. I mean,
Right.
True.
Right. I
But-
mean, there's a community orchestra, community band that plays here in Newport, in the bandstand area.
Yeah, sure.
And as you watch them over the summer, as they sort of come together and practice and gel together, because they don't play together the rest of the year, it really grows.
It's marvelous that we
Yeah.
have this sort of gazebo event
Yeah.
happening. And I love the fact that people are, either sit on benches or in their cars, and then when the piece is over, they honk their horns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Modern applause.
Yeah, but it's a good participation that this is what we do. And you look back 100 years ago, if you didn't have a town band, you didn't have music.
Right.
It was like not having water or air. People had to find a way to entertain themselves.
Right.
Now we're entertained to death.
We're staring at screens,
Yeah.
either on our laps or over there, or all the time.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I mean, if you were up after 10 o'clock, that was a little odd as a child. I mean, what was on television at that time, after 11 was the test pattern.
Right.
Now it's like 24 hours a day. We have insomniacs, a whole nation of insomniacs not
Right.
getting enough sleep because, there's so much distraction and there's so much content out there. And I have to say this, how do people make a lasting mark? I hope in some way I can make a lasting mark as, again, what I want this to be, my goal is to make it a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
Baby's first steps, your first tricycle, your first bicycle.
Your first jubo.
Yeah, your first jubo, your first day of
Yeah.
school, your first instrument. And so what I really want to instill in this is the feeling of not being intimidated by it, that it's friendly. In other words, you don't have a teacher who's in a day with 20 students and can handle 20 problems all at once. It's an impossibility. I don't want them to come up with the kind of solutions they have where they say, just move your fingers up and down but don't play, or just pretend you're opening your mouth up
Right.
and down and sing. Because I've taught a lot of these people who had the courage to come to me after years and years of feeling that they were failures or they were not musicians. It's all nonsense. You can teach anything if you put the time in. You look at these poor kids and the poor teachers who have these unfortunately unrealistic schedules where they have to teach a
Right.
child in 45 minutes, one day a week.
I know.
You're not going to
ridiculous.
learn anything that way. So the whole approach to recorder, unfortunately, which has become stigmatized, has been, to me, a resounding failure in our school system. Again, not the fault of the teachers, it's the approach.
So if you were going to take Jubo into, say, the Newport Elementary School,
Yes.
how would you go about it so that people could feel successful at the end of it?
What I would say is that before we have a group, I want to meet with each child individually so I can solve the problems right at the beginning. You don't want to put them all together at once. There they
Right.
are, and they're doing, and then it's total chaos. And then what you have to do is speak in generalities. You're not going to fix, again, as I repeat, 20 problems at once. You have
Right.
to be with each person, make them feel individual. Once you've worked with the first 20, just doing that and making sure that the instrument gets in their hands the moment you start teaching them so the bad habits do
Right.
not form. Then they know what to do. Then you can put them into a group, and then you can start teaching as a group. And besides, it's much more special. Remember, this is their first time they're going to have an instrument. This is going to set their stage for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So if you do it right the first time, you don't have to correct everything that's wrong. Most of the time, these teachers have to spend most of the time correcting the students.
They do.
I want to progress the students.
Mm-hmm.
That's why after, in recorder education in the United States, what do they play after a year and a half? They play Hot Cross Buns.
Twinkle,
They play
twinkle.
Twinkle, twinkle, buns crossed hot, maybe one half of Jingle Bells. Maybe Mary Had a Little Lamb. But they're not playing things like this.
True.
And they can do that.
Yeah.
All you have to do is have the right approach. So if the schools say, okay, when they're at recess, we'll bring in each child,
Right.
3 to 5 minutes each. What can you do in 45 minutes? There you go. You have 9 kids that you've already gotten on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
Do it again, do it again. How many students you want to do? How many it takes. But the point is start individual, then do the group thing. Then you can save your time. Then you can do your Frederick Taylor business. Frederick Taylor is a person who was the father of time management. In other words, when you went to a Ford plant, everybody ended up looking like automatons. I can't pronounce it, because they were doing one task in the least amount of time. Then you can do Frederick Taylor. The point is, recorder education got a bad start pretty much in the 1920s. Arnold Dolmetsch had the right idea, but a man named Peter Harlan from Germany decided to put that approach into a mass production. He mass-produced instruments and he mass-produced the education. And he had these large groups of kids playing instruments that didn't play right. It was Edgar Hunt in England that had the right idea. So you had English and German systems fighting each other over the years, and that got mixed in the American school system. So there's still people that still teach German. If you know the right instrument, you can teach German properly. You can play an F major, great. The other keys, forget it. If you have Baroque, you can play in all the keys. But it takes more work.
Right.
And the recorder takes a lot of work. I've been playing recorder for 55 years, and let me tell you this. It doesn't get any easier for me. You want to do something? I just played in New York, Early Music New York. We did a concert, soprano recorder and Baroque orchestra. And I put about maybe 5 or 6 hours of my time just to polish that to get that right. I mean, you can read things right off, but if you want to make it good, I find that my workload for those instruments hasn't changed since day one.
So what's the point having that as the instrument du jour for kids? None.
It's too difficult.
Yeah.
And as soon as we say that, we say to ourselves, yeah, but it's cheap, and that's how the school systems go. Now we can say we have a music program.
That's the approach to education, period. It's cheap.
Correct.
It doesn't have to be effective. It's cheap.
Correct.
Great.
Do I have a minute and a half to read something out of my book?
Sure.
Great. This is from the Jubo Journey, which is available. Go to jubomusic.net. I'm going to read chapter 5, and it's not very long. It's only a page and a half.
Sure.
And it's called A $1 Flute is No Bargain. We see them at dollar stores, usually located in the toy section next to the Cinderella bubbles and the plastic toy pistols. They usually come wrapped in clear plastic and displayed in 2 or 3 colors. They usually look like little flutes, and if you ever pick one up, you may think at first you just bought a musical instrument at a bargain price. You bought it because you thought, if I can just get my child exposed to something musical, then it will increase his or her chance of playing well later on. But the opposite is about to happen. When you get that instrument home, you may discover either 2 things. A, it doesn't sound very good, or B, it doesn't sound good at all. When your child plays the one that sounds not so good, you may tell your child not to play it because it doesn't sound very nice. Not a wonderful thing to tell someone who's starting out in music.
Right.
Also, if the instrument doesn't make a sound at all, you're going to wonder why something's not happening. If the instrument is not built to do the job right, the child may blame themselves. And we haven't even mentioned all the bad habits you're about to see your child get locked into. If you want your child to learn a musical instrument, chances are they'll do better buying one from a music store. There, they sell instruments, not toys.
Right.
Toys are usually not serious instruments, and at $1, they're no bargain either. When an instrument is well made and a method is well thought out, with a repertory creating satisfaction among those who play and hear it, that's a good value. Succeeding in music is a value. Playing on a well-made instrument is a great deal. And when parents invest in themselves and play music with their children,
Right.
that's priceless. But if you leave your child with a dollar store sound maker for them to figure out, you probably did it to distract your child, not educate them. And what usually happens to those items a year from now, they end up on your garage sale table, Goodwill, or your local landfill.
True.
That's what we do with things we usually call junk. Children do not deserve junk. They deserve a chance. It doesn't take a lot of money for a decent music education. That's what's needed for school systems that are pressed for money. And when done right, children play well and end up succeeding. You decide what that's worth to you.
So in the last couple of minutes, if somebody watching this is interested in learning more or helping their kids learn a Jubo instrument, what do they do?
JuboMusic.net.
JuboMusic.net.
Right.
Okay.
www.jubomusic.net. As I said, we're working now to start the pilot programs in the New York City area. Queens will be our first area. In that website, we tell you a little bit about that, but more importantly, you can see what's available as far as what we call Jubo Ed. And for teachers who want to learn to teach the Jubo way, we have Jubo U. So the whole point is get acquainted with it, listen to the examples, look at the videos. We have self-instructed videos you can see on YouTube. The whole point is to get yourself playing immediately.
So you live up here. I understand that New York is the first place that's willing to work with you. What about starting something up here?
Well, here I am, folks. I mean, I've certainly invited myself to the schools. It's up to them whether they want to take that on.
Okay, the schools are just about out for the summer. So is there any possibility for people over the summer learning something?
Absolutely. All they have to do is get in touch with JuboMusic.net and say, hey, we want to start a program, or I want to start to learn.
Can we start a group? Something like that.
Well, of course you can. So,
that would be great.
you know, I
So-
would say now there's still time as things will start to get even busier and busier
Right.
for me. We're sold in 35 states, and so I teach all across the country. I have, I'll be teaching this summer at Chautauqua in 2 sessions. I'll be teaching down in Kentucky.
Wow.
And then, of course, there's still the West Coast, but I don't want to say anything right now because...
We don't talk about the West Coast.
Okay.
We're the Northeast Kingdom.
All right.
Let's start here.
No, but
I mean, joking apart, you live here, you manufacture Jubo here. I mean, this is a Newport business. You're a Newport business
right.
person.
And it could be a Vermont thing.
We
but-
should be accessing you.
Yeah. Right now, it's moving more out of Vermont. I would like to see it remain in Vermont. It's up to the Vermonters to say themselves, can we make it our identity?
Right. I mean, obviously, I didn't know about this before until I saw a little posting that you put in Front Porch Forum.
Yeah.
And that was what got me to knock on your door and say, hey, tell me more.
And it was great having
That
you.
was fun.
Yeah.
And if that can be available for other people up here, I mean, there's lots of locations. The library would probably be loving hosting something. It's a great space.
Well, again, as I said, I've certainly made my overtures to all the schools here.
Cool.
It's up to them to decide whether they want to or not. I know that a lot of the times it's not because they don't want to, it's just they're so busy.
And they've had 2 horrible years that they're trying to recover from.
Right. But right now the work seems to be going outside of Vermont.
Yeah.
I would hate to see this company just completely leave Vermont
So
and
would I.
adopt its identity elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's Vermont's to either have or to lose.
Okay. Well, with that as a challenge, we have to stop for today. But I'd really love to see this go further. So let's see what can happen now. So thank you for coming in.
I'll play you off at the end.
Oh, cool. Do that.
Okay. Sorry.
Do, 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 do.
That's all, folks.
Thank you. you. That was